The most important thing is to recognise it's very different from when I was mayor last time. Then the Labour government was piling billions more into public services. Now it's a question of what are the small things the mayor can do to make life tolerable for the average Londoner who's getting by on, well under £25,000 a year. That means cutting the fares. We've got the highest fares in the world. And the difference between Boris Johnson and me, because he's committed to increasing them 2% above inflation every year, is that you'll save £1,000 over the 4 years of the next mayoral term if I'm mayor, just because the fares will be cheaper. Transport for London is the biggest buyer of electricity because we run the underground. They pay half what the householder pays. So what we can do is actually say, Transport for London will buy more, and you can sign up to transfer your account from EDF or whatever to Transport for London. You can save about £150 a year. So all those little things, it doesn't matter if you're, on 200 grand a year, but it makes a huge difference to the majority of Londoners. I grew up in a world where there was just the postman who came along. It always was a man in those days, and it was 3 times a day, and you had an amazing service, and it's been eroded. And I think it's just outrageous that postal workers have to distribute commercially collected and profit-making stuff that's then dumped on them to deliver. If someone wants to run a genuine alternative to the post office, let them do door-to-door delivery. But it literally is just a way in which a lot of friends of people in high places get to make a very nice little profit because the system's been rigged in the favour of the private companies. And if they could ever build it up enough, then they could smash the postal service. The key issue in British politics for the last 30 years has been ignoring the erosion of working class jobs, and we've seen relentless attacks on the postal workers, trying to privatise it again and again, cutting down the numbers, doing away with full-time employees and having all sorts of casualisation. And that repeats what we've seen in our manufacturing industry and a lot of other public services, and it's got to stop because you're ending up in a situation where there's graduate employment, and then everything else is low skill and no wage. And we've got to build a much better balance of jobs in exactly the same way that Germany has managed to hang on to. We've got to prioritise investment and get investment up both in the public and private sector, because without that you continue to see a relative decline between us and other countries. So investment is the single most important factor that underpins a successful economy. And if you look back at Mrs. Thatcher's regime, there's only one bit of manufacturing she was interested in. They invested in that, and we're a world leader in it. The trouble is, that's armaments. Well, the really amazing thing about the jobs we've lost over the last 4 years of this recession and the banking crisis is 2/3 of them have been in construction. And we've got 700,000 families on the waiting list in London for a decent home. These are people who almost never be able to afford to buy their own home. We've got to start building good council homes for rent again. And you would put back tens of thousands of people to work. You'd take them off the dole, they'd be paying tax, not collecting benefit, and you'd also get the homes, decent homes for people to live in. So for me, it's investing in new housing, thinking ahead to Crossrail 2 and Crossrail 3, expanding public transport, because London's population's growing and we need the homes and the public transport infrastructure. Otherwise, this city will just be gridlocked. Back in 1983, the GLC produced a report for the government saying that we should have a fibre optic cable grid linking every home, school, workplace in the whole country. And we thought you would create hundreds of thousands of new jobs on the back of that. And of course, Mrs. Thatcher was in love with Rupert Murdoch. She wanted satellite TV, and therefore none of that happened. I think France created 500,000 jobs just by cabling up half the country. And we need to now make that at the forefront of what we're doing, investing in the new high-tech jobs that you could create by having the most advanced broadband system. Whatever it is, however rapidly it develops, we should be at the front of that, because that's one area where we'll never claw back, the traditional manufacturing that's gone to developing nations. But we should be investing in the new modern technologies that will create hundreds of thousands of jobs for our children. When I became mayor, we had 25,500 police. I left a budget for 32,000. In the last 2 years, Boris Johnson has seen 2,000 police jobs go and close the training centre at Hendon. Now they're having to bring people out of retirement to pay them to train new people to get ready for the Olympics. Well, they should have known the Olympics was coming. It did get a lot of publicity. And I've given a commitment. We will restore all the cuts in policing that Boris Johnson has made, not just the Olympics, but for Londoners after the Olympics. And you need coppers on the street which deter crime. That's the most important factor. Unfortunately, the Mayor's got no direct power over schools, but what the Mayor can do is be making the case for the investment we need. We've found a way to reinstate the education maintenance allowance, and a lot of our kids, that £30 a week was the crucial factor in keeping them in college, getting the skills they need to be able to get a proper job in the future. I mean, I'm not in favour of parental choice. I think parents should send their kids to the local school, and because of this fracturing, some schools are having to cope with disproportionate numbers of kids with particular needs and problems. Other schools are cornering all the most academically talented. I think each school should have a proper mix of abilities so that school's manageable. And therefore, I'm not in favour of private education. I'm not in favour of people running around looking for an advantage over other kids. Let's make our local schools work. 30 years ago, at the time of the GLC, one of the biggest things we did was massive expansion of childcare, nurseries all over London, working with local groups because the state wasn't providing. And I think the Labour government got it half right when they started down the Sure Start scheme. But that should have been a national scheme. Every child should be going there, a good mix of middle and working class kids in each one of them. And therefore protecting that now and protecting the individual schemes like the one we got here at Mount Pleasant are absolutely crucial. We're looking to find bits of money inside the old mayoral budget, what we can squeeze out in terms of efficiencies so that we can start funding preschool childcare as much as possible across London until we get a Labour government that can bring in a proper national scheme. The media report this mayoral contest as a personality issue, but in actual fact there's not been a clearer choice between the two main parties in recent times. Boris Johnson, clearly stands for a very small privileged elite. He campaigns to cut the top rate of tax for the richest 1%, but won't defend local hospitals being threatened with closure. He goes on about tax on Europe because he's posturing in order to become the next Tory leader, replacing Cameron, whilst doing nothing to look after the interests of ordinary Londoners by keeping fares down, restoring the cuts in policing. This is a mayor more than anyone else, only focused on a small elite. All of my policies are about doing the best you can for the vast majority. And therefore, this is the clearest choice, whether you look at it in terms of Labour Tory or class terms or straightforward ideological terms. No one can go into this election saying they're all the same. They really aren't.